The most powerful of these events took place in the months before I had the experience that led to my writing of Communion. On a clear September day in 1985, I found myself at the Manhattan apartment of a scientist friend, John Glideman, looking at the single most incredible thing I had ever seen. It was a photograph of a face, haunting, eerily reminiscent of ancient Egypt. It stared up at me from a desert plain, and, incredibly, from memory. Is this the bogey? I asked Dr. Glideman. Not the bogey. He replied. I regarded the image. It reminded me a little of the Sphinx, but there was something harder, more brutal, more primitive about this face. How old? I asked. I was beginning to have a very eerie feeling, as if I could place the thing somewhere in my own past. Possibly 50,000 years, possibly a lot older. I inventoried my mind. Had I seen this in an old book of Egyptian sculpture in a dream? I couldn't get it to return, not quite. I noticed a mischievous smile on John's face. It's a NASA photo. The face is on Mars. Glideman explained that the images had been returned by the Viking orbiter in 1976. I just couldn't believe it, but it was there. The worst part of it, the part that was really shaking me up, was that I remembered it. I damn well remembered it. Spitting out the demons. Popping out of holes. Good times. Spitting out the demons. Loving in the good times. Spitting out the demons. Good times. Spitting out the demons. What was I to think? That I'd been to Mars or somehow seen what was on its surface? No matter how I explained it away, seeing the face was still an enormous event in my life, far larger than I could ever have imagined, even until recently understood. It may well have been the trigger that caused the close encounter of December the 26th, 1985 to take place.
Okay. All right, let us begin on this multi-platform meeting. I have got to keep an eye on all the tech, different things, or at least I want to. It'd be a miracle if nothing crashes, because I've never tried this before. I've got two cameras, two different streaming areas, and then on X, there's a meeting going on. So I'm going to put my attention mostly on Zoom. I will try and check the chat messages on YouTube, but if you're on YouTube, well, you might not have the link to Zoom, actually, because that was just for my subscribers. But anyway, if you do have it and you want to come over to Zoom, then I suggest that's where the action is going to be. So I'm on Zoom now. I mean, I'm looking at who's on Zoom. Hey, Ollie. Hey, Derek. I guess you can hear me good. Yeah. and William. And there's two other people who don't have their camera on. If you want to put your camera on, now is the time. Okay. Right, so I just flipped over to YouTube there without meaning to. I'm going to start with something that will probably be familiar. Wait, I didn't hit record, I think, on Zoom. It's an oversight.
Recording in progress.
I didn't do that on the last men's meeting as well. Somehow it didn't record. Yeah, so I'm going to start with, I think it's a parable. I'm not sure if I know the difference between a parable, a fable, and an allegory. I'm sure there is a difference between all those things, but whichever it is, I'm guessing that some or even all of you have heard it before. It's very short, and I just found it online, so I'll just read it. It's not like there's an official version, I don't suppose, seeing as this is the kind of thing that gets passed on by, by word of mouth. A Chinese farmer gets a horse, which soon runs away. A neighbor says, "That's bad news." The farmer replies, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" The horse comes back and brings another horse with him. Good news, you might say. The farmer gives the second horse to his son, who rides it, and is thrown and badly breaks his leg. "So sorry for your bad news," says the concerned neighbor. "Good news, bad news, who knows?" the farmer replies. In a week or so, the emperor's men come and take every able-bodied young man to fight in the war. Farmer's son is spared. "Good news," says his friends and neighbors. "Good news, bad news, who knows?" So, of course, that could carry on. I'm sure there are longer versions of that story. It makes me want to write one, because how long could you go on with that? You could probably write a 1,000-page novel if you're a Russian author living on a farm somewhere. And, well, it'd be a good one. I mean, it could be a good novel. Obviously, there'd have to be more content. I mean, it goes without saying, but I mean, there'd have to be a more elaborate kind of unfolding of these events, and a more elaborate demonstration of why what we think is good news might not be, because it might then lead to something we think is bad news, but then we don't know that that's bad news because it may lead to good news, and so on. So anyway, the context for this might be obvious to some, the more astute listeners or viewers who are paying attention to my recent output, at least. The context for it is Trump 2.0 and the so-called Second American Revolution. And don't worry, I'm not going to talk very much about that, because I really don't think it's very interesting, not at the level that I want to talk at anyway. I mean, of course, everything is interesting if we give our attention to it, I suppose. Dog shit just came to mind there, but I don't have dogs. I do have goat shit. I don't really pay attention to the goat shit in the way that I find it interesting, but it is something that I have to deal with once a week. I've decided to change my goat's straw every week now, so I was doing it about every 2 or 3 weeks, which A, wasn't so fair on the goats, B, wasn't so fair on me, because it's a lot more unpleasant work if you leave it too long. Not the shit so much as the urine. Who's seen a goat take a shit? I've only got 3 people to get a show of hands. William has, right? So it's really no muss, no fuss. It just pours out their butt. They don't stop. They don't squat. They just carry on doing their thing, and out comes the turds. And what is convenient for them also, it somewhat extends to the goat herd, because goat shit isn't particularly problematic. I read a quote recently. I'm completely coming off topic, but that's all right. As Tolstoy said, the difference between violence wielded by the state and violence in a revolution is the difference between dog shit and cat shit. And I thought, how clever is Tolstoy here? Because there's all the difference in the world between dog shit and cat shit, as everybody knows. I assume Tolstoy knew that, which is that cats bury their shit. so you don't have to deal with cat shit if you have cats. But did he mean it in that subtle way, or was he just being funny? In which case he should have said the difference between dog shit and pig shit, or something where there's more of a continuum. I don't have pigs actually, so I can't really speak to that. And cow shit's different because cow shit is manure. Anyway, I mean, shits are all different. So I'm guessing that Tolstoy was being clever because Tolstoy was clever. But then that would suggest he was advocating revolution and saying that they bury their own shit rather than spread it all around for you to walk in, which I don't think is true. I think revolutionary violence causes just as much problems as the other kind. But I guess it does depend on the spirit of the revolution. But anyway, that sort of does bring me back on topic somewhat. So there's this idea that there's a revolution going on in the US and that's being led by the president. Pause for laughter and check YouTube and stuff. Let me just see, 20 people on YouTube. Check not Solaria, X, 4 people. All right, so basically I'm just going to stay on Zoom. It'd be better if, there we go, ask and you shall receive. I was going to say, better if people can turn their cameras on. Hi, Daniel. So that just leaves Robert. If you're on YouTube, I suggest coming over to Zoom, really, because as I said, it's where my attention's going to go. I can't just keep flipping back and forth. So I wonder if I should probably just put the link in YouTube. You can't be high or stoned or drunk or anything if you come over to Zoom. That's the only rule. And you can't smoke or vape while you're here. You don't have to turn your camera on, but it's better if you do. So let me just real quick put the link on YouTube. Real quick. Copy link. Hopefully that works. We'll see. If people start showing up, I'll figure it worked. Anyway, there's enough for a respectable meeting here. It's actually my minimum. Me plus 5. Right, so where was I? Good news, bad news. Right, so the Trump thing, what are we going to call it? The PSYOP. Let's just keep it simple. The Trump PSYOP is gaining a lot of traction with people who, in my opinion, should know better. I mean, supposed researchers and commentators and whatnot. Because there are these apparent gains. Like he's been in office, 3 weeks or something? See loads of people coming over now. Excuse me. And I hear stuff is happening. It's unusual. I'm not even going to tax my brain by trying to think and remember what they are, but USAID and the JFK files, and it's pushback against woke and lots of people being fired and blah, blah, blah. And yet I could get excited if I paid attention to my wife and I followed some of the links that I see here and there, and I took the time to look into it. I could get excited as Chuck Valentine, I almost use his real name, is talking about on today's Jobcast. It is good spectacle. It's good entertainment. When was the last time that a presidential election led to interesting stuff going on at a superficial socio-political level and even a slightly deep socio-political level? It's good drama. I'm not going to argue with that. But what I'm responding to is that what Charles Fort called the bellwethers, which is an analogy that's appropriate for somebody who keeps goats. I think a bellwether was one of the cows that had a bell that led the other cows, or I don't know. I have to, don't take my word for it. But it's something. The way he used it anyway was an illegitimate leader of others who lures them into bad situations. Roughly, bellwethers, who's championing or or pointing the way towards some cause or some this or some that, and that people follow blindly. So anyway, these bellwethers who are blindly following the psyop, and I mean following in this sense, not in the sense of just paying attention to, are then leading others into this same folly, which is the folly of false hope. And I'm saying that even if Trump is really genuinely battling with certain another faction and so on, and even if some of this is real, I'm still saying so what? And I'm saying that the apparent gains, even if they are more than apparent, if they're actually real for particularly Americans in 2025, and maybe even they'll continue until 2026, maybe even they'll last 5 or 10 years. Maybe there's a real, quote unquote, revolutionary change that's happening that will make America just a little bit great again. Or as I tweeted, take it back maybe 20 years to when W was reading a book on goats, that's goats again, to kids, and the Twin Towers came down, or whatever, take it back pre-woke. So a lot of the Americans who've been primed and triggered and co-opted and manipulated and fooled into desperately needing something that would just do a little reset and get back to what now seems like sanity, is 2001 and W. I just came up spontaneously for me today, that comparison, just because of the photo, but apparently there's more to it, because neoliberal feudalism was right. He made the comparison too. So, and I think because Trump's going to go after Iran, and so yeah, it is a bit like it's a rewind, and that this is providing some relief. But the thing is, what's that a cover for? It's like if you give someone some dope or some hopium so that they feel a little bit better, you better believe that they're going to get some suppository up the ass, or some mRNA needle jabbed in the back of their neck, or something even worse, while they're distracted and placated by this drug, this temporary relief. So anyway, as I said, I didn't want to get into the minutiae. I have a vision for today, which is that this is all a demonstration or a way to see more clearly something that's much larger and that pertains to all of us individually and to our soul life, what really counts. Those who've arrived, if you can turn your cameras on, at least one of you I know can't, but if you can, it's better for everybody. I'm glad that the link worked anyway. I've got a few notes here, so I might actually grab them and fall back on them if I need to, but I'm hoping that just my organic memory, my body memory of something that hasn't happened yet. I mean, I wrote down the notes, so I've got a body memory of writing the notes down. I don't have a body memory of actually turning the notes into this non-TED talk, Jason talk, but in the future I will, if I do it, so I could tune into the future body memory. Anyway, I'm just being silly now. So good news, bad news. It has to do with the frame of reference, and what we consider good news has to do with this temporary mindset, which will take short-term solutions, not in place of, but short-term solutions will suffice for people to not worry about long-term problems. So the ultimate short-term solution versus long-term problem or issue would be, I would say, what our soul needs, or what is going to be good for our souls, versus what we personally would like as soon as possible. And I don't think it'd be overly exaggerating to say that one is aligning with God, reality, and the other is aligning, well, with the opposite of God, which is a bit of a head fuck in itself, I think, because God surely doesn't have an opposite. But the opponent, even that's a head fuck. Like I used to make a joke about a war between God and Satan would be like a war between the US and Iran. I said Afghanistan in the past, but let's keep it topical. it's not really a war, right? There's something else going on there, some sort of theatre by which one superpower is exploiting and manipulating and using for its own ends some, dinky winky, whatever the opposite of super is, some, relatively powerless thing, but that is useful as an instrument for its geopolitical agendas. Of course, this gets complicated if we go into that analogy, but let's keep it on the metaphysical. Satan is an instrument of God. Heresy. I know if I've got any Eastern Orthodox here, they're not going to be happy already. But sorry, but everything must be an instrument of God, because otherwise it's not God. So that would have to include Satan. Whether God hit himself on the thumb with the hammer called Satan and is still trying to, suck his thumb better, I don't know. It's funny. It's a funny analogy because I got this finger is super swollen today. I think I got bitten by a spider or something. But anyway, so I know how God feels. But yeah, so the point is what's God's plan? Keeping it simple and mythopoetic, which is to say our soul's purpose and trajectory, versus what we personally would like because of our conditioned mind, our conditioned identity, which is shaped by trauma and therefore configured in a way that's addictive and compulsive and self-destructive and self-sabotaging, and essentially ends up gearing itself against reality, putting itself against reality. So take the last name out just in case we're being watched. I mean, of course we're being watched, but in case it matters. Right, so I see that war, as it were, it's not really a war, but that dichotomy or that polarity as mind versus soul, and the body is in the middle. Body is the battleground. I mean, that's the traditional view of the war between God and Satan for the soul, with the body as the battleground, or roughly it's like that. Well, it could just be the human soul as the battleground, but I'm going to say the body because we should always have in the picture something that is absolutely, tangibly, experientially real, which you cannot say about the mind. Not really. And although I think we need to say about the soul, we have to put a question mark, like, can we say it? Can we talk about the soul without losing the ground of what we know, what we're talking about, or knowing what we're talking about? Whereas the body, we can be sure, like the goats and the shit. It's observable, it's consistent, it doesn't change. No amount of new age wishy-washing is gonna change the reality of goat shit. I didn't finish my analogy about goat shit, did I? It was just that if you wait too long, the straw is just soaked with urine. And of course that soaks into the ground, and so the cleaning out the goat shed is just much more unpleasant, and clearly it would be more unpleasant for the goats having to wait that long to get new straw. So why did I wait that long? Just, I don't know, well, because straw is short in supply. That's the main reason. So I got a whole bulk delivery of straw, and now I think it's a good source. Basically, I just do it every week, and it'll be better and easier for everyone, and just a little bit more expensive. So I mean, it's a tiny, almost trivial, except not to me, or the goat's example of, well, what does the mind say? Short-term solution, just wait 3 weeks because then you don't have to do it so often. Creates long-term problems, really, as in takes a lot longer to, the analogy isn't quite holding up, but it's good enough. Certainly, if I was tuning in with my body and therefore my soul, I'm pretty sure I would have reached this conclusion sooner rather than later. It had to get quite unpleasant for my mind to see the consequences of waiting too long to change the straw. Now, with the Trump admin, etc., yeah, I don't know how long. I find it baffling that people can actually convince themselves that the little good that Donald Trump, sock puppet for reptilians, whatever, all in quotes, is apparently doing, in any way compensates for the massive policy advancements that are also underway with DJT, which are horrifying and chilling, but no more so than they Where with the last administration, it's just that I think that they're getting fast-tracked with Trump because everything's getting fast-tracked. So, yeah, short-term benefits is what the mind wants, but we're selling the soul short. And so I would extend this to any sort of desire for a socio-political solution. It's always going to be short-term. And, well, I can't say it will never address the needs of the soul, but it seems highly unlikely. That it will. I mean, there is an argument to be made that if there's too much pressure that we're under at a superficial level, socially, politically, with woke, let's say, then we just can't relax enough to tune into what the soul wants. So a little bit of space for breathing would be good, you would think. But I'm going to have to say no, sorry, because this is 2025 and, apocalypse is what, 20, 30 years late already. I mean, I was talking about it when I was 20, so that was 40 years ago, and I knew I could see it coming then. So I don't know, I think God took mercy on us, and so it's that guy, Jason down there, he might think he's ready, but he's not, and most other people don't even think they're ready because they don't even know what to get ready for. So let's give a few more decades so people can really get a bit more organized. I mean, the souls, there can be just enough souls for some sort of ship of light to ascend out of this morass as it really sinks into the lake of darkness. Anyway, this is taking a lot longer than I thought. Actually, I was thinking, for a number of reasons, I was thinking, well, I could probably keep my little thing to half an hour, and then if there's no interest in interactive, then I can just have an early night. But yeah, I haven't even got a quarter of the way through my notes. I'm going to actually look at them, not because I want to cheat, but because it might speed me up a little bit. But I have been sticking to them. So it says here, well, I didn't even get to the first analogy, but I sort of skipped ahead. I was going to use sex as an analogy without going into any personal things, and then I've got a body to mind, or body to soul, and then the body that goes to the mind goes to soullessness. So what that was about, and then it says giving power to what is illegitimate but will provide relief, which I've been talking about here with the Trump thing. It's illegitimate power, bringing about illegitimate things, but people are experiencing kind of relief that won't last. So I thought sex would be a good direct personal analogy for everyone. It's all guys as usual. I think it is, which I'm happy about. But I don't want to alienate any women if they do show up. No, it's all guys. And I'm not going to get sidetracked by why I said that. But here's a living example. I can talk to a bunch of guys about our sexuality without having to think about how women will receive it, without having to include their point of view. Sorry, girls. But you should be glad if you are listening somewhere on X or YouTube, then you're getting to hear, what guys talk about when you're not there. So how many guys here have had sex? Full stop, I suppose. Yeah, well, let's start where actually we're going to get a definite show of hands. It's all right, Sean. I would have taken it for granted. I'm not sure if I saw William raise his hand, but William's an older guy, so we're going to take that as a given, unless he's Ted Kaczynski or something. So, okay, so we've all had sex. How many guys have had sex and it wasn't as good as they thought it was going to be? Wow, not you, Daniel. Not William. Well, every time it's been exactly as good as you thought it would be. Yeah, I mean, these questions are just, they're just a fill-out. They're just a warm-up. I'm assuming that yes and yes. But anyway, if you want to say no, that's fine. Amazing. Then you won't be able to get with what I'm going to talk about here today. But anyway, so then how many of you have had sex and felt kind of guilty afterwards, or a little bit ashamed, or just not right in yourself in some way? Ollie doesn't want to raise his hand there, but he's thinking about it. I know, be honest, don't worry. I mean, you are being recorded, but nobody's going to see this, except me. Right, so then how many of you have ever had the sense before, during, after sex that your mind wants sex independently of your body? Like there's a way to just physically want sex, and then there's a way to kind of want it in your mind. Like this idea about having sex, and right. There was a few. It was about half the guys got that and responded. So you know what I'm talking about anyway. So this is the analogy I want to make. So then I guess the last question is how many of you have ever had the sense or even the thought that your soul might want sex? There might be some kind of sex that your soul wants to have. What wants you to have, if you want to keep the soul separate. So Derek raised his hand, the youngest guy here. Nobody else did. How many of you at least know what I'm talking about? That's more, yeah. William's the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Uncooperative. Robert says yes. That's okay. Maybe William has had a bad time in school and he doesn't like raising his hand. I sure did. Okay, so what my analogy here is that, and my experience, I have to say, because I always try to speak from experience, which is why I don't like to talk about US politics or any politics. My experience is that if I follow my mind, well, first of all, let's start with the body. My body definitely wants sex, definitely during the night, because I wake up all night long with a boner, and it's getting worse as I'm getting older. Sorry, that's the bad news, guys. If you thought it was going to get easier as you get older, it doesn't, at least not in my experience. I call it my Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. So all night long I'm horny, but then when I wake up, and even in the night when I wake up, my wife's asleep, so it's not convenient. But when I wake up and begin the day, I can't find it. I don't really have a desire to have sex, except mentally. I think I've got to have sex, because I've got this desire that's keeping me awake at night. But otherwise, I can't locate it in my body. I don't have a physical desire for sex during the day, really, hardly at all. And so I won't go too much into details, but that's probably enough of the personal details. So what I've been learning over the years is that, okay, the body does want sex sometimes, maybe quite a lot, really, but it's a physiological thing, and it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? There's all these other elements, which is starting with what my wife wants or doesn't want. But my mind gets a hold of that, as I just said, and it's got these other investments in having sex, and so it's basically saying, "No, come on, have sex. You need to have sex. You need to have sex." And then there's this third X factor, which is the soul, and the soul is closely aligned with the life force and the body is closely aligned with libido and the sex drive. So there's a continuum there. Now, where does the mind come in? This is a question. I'm not going to answer it, but I don't. This would go into a whole different meaning if I try to unpack all this. If you come to the men's group, if you want to go deeper into this is just an analogy. So the analogy is that when you're going to have sex, trust your soul to lead you. And if your soul isn't leading you into sex, well, trust your body. However, if you can't keep your mind out of it, and your mind has to lead the way and say, if you want to have sex, body, this is what you have to do. Move your hand this way, buy some flowers, say some nice things, whatever it is, to contrive the circumstances so that your body gets to have sex, then don't trust that. That's like Donald Trump. That's your illegitimate leader that's saying, I can solve your problems, I can give you relief, I can give you these these short-term solutions so that you think that all your problems are over. But of course they're not, because a few more days go by and then you're horny again and you think, what do I do with this? What do I do with all this energy and this life force? And your mind will say, I don't know. I mean, if you're a lone guy on your own, obviously the analogy would just jack off to some porn, or maybe be a bit more virtuous, acknowledge your soul and don't use porn, but I'll still jack off, right? Your mind will adapt to accommodate super ego and id and all that, so that you can justify these short-term solutions. But really, if you check in with your soul and say, hey soul, do you want me to jack off? It'd probably say, no, that's all right, just hold on, you'll be fine. Somebody says, I always found the act of coitus disgusting. Right, well, so he knows what I'm talking about. Well, I mean, the mind is very divided when it comes to sex. But anyway, I said I didn't want to get too pulled into the analogy itself and forget what it's an analogy for. So it's an analogy for understanding how the soul can be trusted to lead and guide us towards the solution, which is not just long-term, it is eternity. It's the solution that takes us into eternity in the way that we need to arrive at eternity while we're alive. The mind will never get us there. It will never contrive the kind of meaningful, lasting, deep soul bonding sex that we need, and that the body is there for. The body's desire is supposed to be put in service of the soul, I would say, and it can be a mutual thing. Essentially, within this analogy, the real sex that we're looking for, the purpose of sex, is to unite the body with the soul. So it's like the soul is I won't say having sex, but is consummating with the soul. I forget if I said body or soul, but the body and the soul are consummating together in this act of love with another of the opposite sex. So anyway, whatever I said, I can't remember what I said before that. Yeah, don't remember where I was going with that. I think I pretty much covered it. Yeah, I think I did. I think I pretty much covered it. So I'll look at my notes. Yeah, well, it's just like changing subject now. So maybe I'll just pause for a while or a minute or so. If anybody wants to jump in, I don't have to cover all my notes. It's perfectly fine if I don't. There's lots of comments on YouTube, but I don't have time for them. You know, I'm only using YouTube because there's a bunch of people who don't, I mean, they don't make me aware of them. They don't show themselves to me unless I do YouTube, and even them, and like Oswald Spengler, I don't know where you are the whole time when I'm not on YouTube. I don't recognize any others, but there's 27 people on YouTube, so I bet that more than half of those are not commenting or anything at Children of Job, and they're certainly not at the men's group, but that's true pretty much of everybody at on Zoom here, except for one, I think. So yeah, so for those on YouTube, where are you? Come aboard, get more involved, because I don't want to use YouTube. I'm only using it because you're out there, like 4,000 followers or something. And well, the Monopticon, the weekly men's meeting, is where the fun happens, really. But if you're not ready for that, Children of Job, come on over. There's a link in the show notes for the YouTube people. Anyway, that was just a commercial break. Does anyone want to say anything before I move into part 2 of this presentation? Just see who else is here. There's 2 Rosses. Daniel, go ahead. Can you unmute? Are you able to? I'll do this just in case you're having trouble.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. All right. Hi, Jason. First of all, I came on to. I always like hearing what you have to say and talk about. Actually, I was listening to your most recent Children of Job podcast before coming on here, and was only interrupted by having to come on here, which I'm very glad I did. But I listened to your other interview. I don't think it was on your podcast, but somewhere else that you said. You mentioned how disappointed you were that there weren't more people coming on, especially to your men's group, and so I thought I really wanted to make an effort to do that today. One of the reasons I haven't been is because of my work schedule.
Well, that's all right. That's all, I mean, you're actually sort of on topic for what my next subject is, but
okay.
But yeah, please, no need to give explanations or anything like that.
No, but anyway, hearing you say that gave me more impetus.
It motivated you. Well, that's good.
It motivated me.
That's good to hear, because I wonder sometimes if it's counterproductive. If I'm too transparent and too nakedly vulnerable in that way, where I'm basically saying, "Where is everybody? Why, show yourself. I'm lonely," and things like that, then it will actually have the opposite effect.
Yeah, no, I think it hit a nerve. It may, for some people, have an opposite effect, but for a kind of a more intuitive guy like me, or an introvert like me, it kind of resonates. Yep. So
yeah.
But back to the topic of sex. Your question about the soul having sex. One of the things that it's my belief or understanding, whatever, that the mind and the soul are the same thing. But not everyone would agree with that. But when you say, has anyone had the experience where their soul was involved in the act? Can you elaborate a bit on that? And I'll mute myself there. I'll just listen for now.
Right. So Daniel wants to stay on the sex topic. It's not really surprising. Does anyone else particularly want me to answer that? I'm not sure I have an answer, but I'm just wondering if I should let Daniel direct to that extent. I mean, because questions, they can be good, but they can also be not good. I don't mean good question, bad question. I mean that can be the right moment for a question. Here comes someone else. How about I bookmark it, Daniel, because it's a very deep question, and also you brought up another deep question which has come up at a meeting where one woman does show up, Nina Power, about what we mean by the mind, and she had a similar point of view as Daniel. That's not the mind I'm talking about. I'm talking about the mind, Daniel, that gives you a hard time all day long, nagging about meaningless shit that keeps you awake at night, that bristles with resentment and envy. I'm talking about that kind of mind, the mind that that you can't trust. I think you're thinking of something like consciousness, probably being synonymous with mind. Am I right? Close enough, yeah. Well, certainly, I would say true sentience comes from the soul. And so, yeah, ideally our mind should be an organ of the soul, but I don't think it is currently. So, but anyway, the other thing that Daniel brought up was very specific as to what motivated to come here. That does dovetail exactly with the next part of what I was going to talk about today, which is parasocialism, which is a phrase that I coined just yesterday. Well, I think I coined it. Maybe someone else has used it. But anyway, it was obviously waiting to happen because I've been writing about parasocial relations for a long time, a few years. And I've been writing about so-called socialism. I don't know much about socialism because I grew up in a fake socialist kind of background. And of course, parasocialism is a kind of fake socialism. But anyway, the context is the kind of relations that people expect to have and are becoming more and more accustomed to having. I think this does connect to the first subject, if I can eventually bring it around to the connecting point, is parasocial. Now, parasocial means, I'm not sure exactly what it means because this word para is odd. It means sort of beside, running parallel to. So, but the way I've understood it anyway, a parasocial relationship is a one-way relationship because it's a relationship with somebody that you never actually meet and that doesn't even know that you exist. So, of celebrities being the obvious example. So the people who are trusting in Donald Trump or Elon Musk currently, they have got sucked into a parasocial relationship, which is exactly what the PSYOP is designed to exploit, is that tendency we have to identify with celebrities or powerful world figures and feel like they're just like us and feel like it's as if we know them, as if we personally like them, and as if they would like us, and that we can trust them. And so then we put more and more of our time and energy and attention into this parasocial realm. Now, I don't really do that, or at least I don't do it very well. And I also kind of try not to do it, or I try to not do it. As in, I don't encourage projections, and I don't elicit parasocial relations. One of the ways I'd say I don't do it is what came up with Daniel, is that mostly somebody who's got a platform, which can be anybody now, but they've got an audience base, which can also just about be anybody, but still, it does take something to develop an audience base. Obviously, they maintain a persona that prevents self-exposure and allows people to project onto them. So they don't necessarily show a kind of vulnerability and other qualities that I try to let show because they're there, they're present. I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't looking for real relations of the non-parasocial kind. And so it just occurred to me recently that actually does put a lot of people off, because if they're looking for parasocial relations, they can't have them, because I'm always saying, no, come over the fourth wall, come through the fourth wall, meet me, let's interact, come to the meetings, and so on. And so there's a kind of, if you get too close to this guy, you're going to get pulled in. And so then that would push people away. Anyway, that just occurred to me recently. It's probably fairly obvious that the way to go viral and the way to generate a large audience is to encourage this kind of parasocial interactive method, and then you just keep building your following, and it's circular as well, because if you have a large following, you can only have parasocial relations. You can't acknowledge or even think about all of these people's existence, never mind invite them into a meeting space, find out about them, have a direct personal relationship with them. It's physically impossible. So anyway, so I thought that this does pertain to this larger thing that's going on in the world, which is we are becoming parasocial beings. And I mean, these are fairly fresh insights, so they might not be very coherent, but like recently I was writing a piece for cultural engineering studies, that's Brett and Thomas, those guys, PSYOP cinema guys, about transhumanism. And in the process of writing it, it occurred to me that the idea of being part of a planet and part of a collective humanity, which I've always found questionable. I've never quite really felt that was a useful way of looking at life. It's only possible, we start with the planet, in the sense we can see the planet from the outside. That was because of photography, if it's even real. But if it is real and the planet's a globe, that's because of this advanced technology that was able to take photographs from satellites and then send them back to Earth. Obviously, the kind of statistics and the communication system that allowed us to become aware of how many people there were allegedly on the planet and where everything was and all that. Just so global consciousness has developed and advanced in tandem with the advanced technology that has made it possible, culminating with Marshall McLuhan's Global Village, which is just that. I mean, it's there in the phrase itself, where the whole globe begins to seem like this community that we're all part of. But of course, a village cannot be global. It's a contradiction in terms. It's an oxymoron, deliberately, because McLuhan was a smart guy. A village is what you call a small community, and the globe is the ultimate population. Anyway, I didn't want to say community because I don't think it's possible for a planetary community, and I certainly don't think it's possible to have planetary consciousness through technology, or rather the kind of consciousness that we develop through technology that we call planetary is not a good idea. So yeah, it occurred to me that this is transhumanism. The idea of humanity itself is transhumanistic, or it's become transhumanistic. And it's parallel with woke and everything. Like, we're supposed to feel exactly the same way about people, no matter what their culture or what their color or what their traditions or what their sexuality and so on. It's this pantheistic view of humanity, quote unquote, that we're supposed to develop in order to be good people, which is a good global citizen, for a global system. So all of this, unfortunately, I remembered the last point that I wanted to get to today. All of this is consistent with a very long-term social engineering psychological operation, which has to do with, it's occurred to me recently anyway, I think it probably is true that it has to do with, I mean, I used to call it the disembodiment agenda. So this is consistent with that. The thing about it, if we get cut off from our body and our connection to our bodies, which technology is facilitating, and cut off from our communities as well, because we get lured into this counterfeit version or experience of our bodies and counterfeit experience of being part of a community through the technology, what else are we losing contact with? I mean, obviously we're losing touch with nature and our own natures, but it occurred to me because of some comment that somebody made, as our ancestors. There's a comment that somebody made about the Beatles being a Tavistock operation. They put Tavistock in quotes, so they were aware that that's a dumbing down. But insofar as there was social engineering groups behind the Beatles, if there was, what was the purpose of this beside the obvious? It was engineering a counterculture and all that stuff. But what was the purpose of that, besides getting people to take drugs and have lots of sex and the things that we've seen that led to woke and right? But what was the deeper purpose that's consistent through all these things? Well, he was saying, this is actually, I'm conflating two people actually, but they're both talking about the Beatles. So one of them was saying, well, there was an understanding at a certain point, or a discovery about parasocial relations. And that was then, that awareness was, to use an easy term, was weaponized. Like, okay, so human beings have a tendency to relate parasocially. How can we exploit that? How can we use that as a means to our own ends? That's point number one. And then point number two, and I mean, the answer being, well, you create celebrity culture, etc., etc. You create mass media, or you shape mass media in such a way that people project onto these figures and feel like they are as meaningful to them as their nearest and dearest and the people that they're interacting with on a daily basis. I mean, how many of us even grew up as teenagers with posters on our wall? I used to have Debbie Harry all over my wall, and then Clint Eastwood, of course, of celebrities who we feel fill a hole or satisfy a need for us that we're not getting from our family and our friends. How many? 95%, 100%. It's just part of growing up. It's part of the teenage rite of passage. Is you find your your parasocial figures anyway. To William says, not I. I'm gonna have to hear from you, William said. You didn't do it at all. Well, let's hear from William now, because it's. So you are Ted Kaczynski then? You did grow up in a cabin. Can you unmute?
I understand last week.
That's very loud. It's very loud.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you don't need to lean forward, I think.
you're saying about conformities to the social norm, yeah?
Yeah, you still need
At the
to
time.
speak.
So when you're younger, going to school.
Speak down a bit.
Slowly.
Speak softly, because it's you must have your mic jacked up to 11.
There we go, ahead. Is that what you mean? I'm talking about like fashion when you're young, like going along with bands and all that type of thing.
Well, yeah, but any kind of celebrities. Did you not have any celebrities that you were interested in?
No, I never succumbed. And there was even one stage when I was older, and I was about 17, 18. I was living in a punk flat. You know, punks with their Mohicans and their hair, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Well, you're going fine, but no thing.
Right.
Because the thing about it was, really, these people used to clean for hours, about 6 hours, to go out on a Friday night. And I suppose it's just the way it struck. But anyway, it's ludicrous. You know, you can't see it from in here.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see it now because there's a little camera. Oh, look, I'm on me. But it doesn't bother me. It's like those kind of things when I was saying about going in the street. I suppose you've never even bothered about what another person may or may not think about you. And I've certainly never had an intention to create a public image.
Sure. Well, that's a separate thing as far as actually being that for someone. Okay. Well, I'm gonna cut you off and finish my own thoughts. You're still very, very loud, aggressively loud. I know it's not you personally, but if it, in the meantime, before you unmute again, if you can check your settings in the microphone settings, there's a way to reduce the level, because yeah, so try that. All right. So where was it? Yeah. So surrounding. Okay. Yeah. So I can't remember what I'd said already now, but I was getting to the ancestors. Yeah. So until the last 100 years or so, like before this culture developed, popular culture existed, which again was hand in hand with the technology for global media. Yes, the printing press was the beginning, but it was a huge leap with radio and then TV and then the internet. I guess those are the big three that just made it global and instant. Telephone as well, but telephone was for family and stuff. And then world travel as well, being able to travel around. But that's more direct.